Hello, my name is Laudon Schuett. I'm a Renaissance lute player, performer, and teacher, and I wanted to talk to you a little bit about my new method for Renaissance lute that I made for my YouTube series, which is called The Fundamentals of Lute Playing. If you don't know me or you don't know my series, I'll include a link in this post so that you have a chance to go explore that. But I wanted to kind of tell you about why I decided on making a loop method and who it might be best for. So, just a little background. A couple years ago, I published a loop method for intermediate and advanced players for Mel Bay. And this was a wonderful, wonderful experience. And working with the publishing company was fantastic, and I got to publish I think 30 original pieces, as well as some great material on learning the lute and topics on it. But it was not designed for beginning lute players. And when I started the series called The Fundamentals of Lute Playing on YouTube, one of my big goals was to get information about the lute, accurate information and helpful information to as many people as possible around the world. I had a vision of sort of getting this information out there so somebody in Alabama, somebody in Canada, somebody in New Zealand, somebody in South Africa, somebody in Madagascar, somebody in India could go on YouTube and get access to some great information on Renaissance lute. What ended up happening was I've got about 50 videos up right now, which are all on various topics, things like right hand, sitting position, reading sources, things like that. And in the comment section, I would get students and they would say, what method do you recommend? Is there a good beginner's method for playing the lute? And, there are a number of really good methods. But I would send them out and I would name it and they go, oh well, it's not available right now. It's not in print, or it's 150 euros. I can't afford this method. And I realized that there was a need for a low cost, high quality lute method. And so I know from having published a book through a publishing company that when you do that, it does raise the price, and it sometimes reduces access for a lot of players because when the book is printed, obviously it costs a lot more. And what we're seeing is printing costs just skyrocketing. So if you go and you get your book printed, it can be quite expensive. And it's not a knock to other loot methods out there, but what I've seen happen is prices going above 100 euros, 100 US dollars, things like that. And it's just getting to be very, very difficult compared to guitar, where you can go and get a Mel Bay, book one, a Hall Leonard book one, something off of a site or something like that. So there's a lot of access in the guitar, and I wanted to improve that for the lute. So I'll tell you what I did. What I basically did was designed a digital lute method. So it is not going to be a physical copy. And one of the reasons I decided to not make it a physical copy was so that I could keep the cost as low as possible. And I wanted to set a cost point that I think most people around the world could meet. And that cost point is $5. And what you get for $5 is two copies of the book, one in French tablature and one in Italian tablature. So that way, if you want to explore both, you can. One thing I will say is apparently, so I'll be selling it through Patreon, and apparently if you purchase it through the Patreon app on iOS, Apple charges a little extra money, so it ends up being $7. So I will put the browser link so that hopefully you get the cheapest possible version of the book. But my goal was to set a price that everybody could afford, and my other goal was to not be limited by publishing and the printing costs. And so that's why it will be a digital book. And I know that some people really enjoy having a physical copy. And I enjoy having physical copies. But I will say that there are some advantages to the digital version, and I will go over that. And what I would recommend to those students who enjoy a physical copy is I think it could be very helpful to just print out the piece or exercise that you're working on currently, and then have your iPad or your iPhone to refer to some of the other things. And I'll explain why that's useful in just a second. So when I designed this book, so here's the cover: Fundamentals of Renaissance Lute Playing. I didn't want to imply that I was covering Baroque lute as well. Someday I may do that, but the Fundamentals of Renaissance Lute Playing, and I tried as hard as I could to make the book as interactive as possible. So, for example, just some quality of life things. If you go to table of contents and you click on an item, it takes you right to it. So I clicked on the preface and it brought me right to the preface. This will be true for any of the sections, and we'll talk a little bit about the sections here in just a second, or any of the pieces. I've got the pieces listed individually in the table of contents. So it's a rather large table of contents so that you can open up the document, go, okay, I really need to review some information on right hand technique. You click the section on right hand technique and it will drop you right there. Now, the next thing that I did, and I'll find a good example here, we'll click on lute notation. So if you go to the chapter on lute notation, I think right now I'm looking at the French edition. Yes, I'm looking at the French edition. So you'll click on the chapter and you'll notice at the beginning of each chapter are relevant videos. And if you click on these relevant videos, it will take you directly to that video on YouTube, which is really, really cool. I'm closing that so you don't have to watch the stupid ad that pops up at the beginning of a YouTube video. But I've got links to all of the Fundamentals of Lute Playing videos when they're relevant to the subject matter. So, for example, this is episode 7, Introduction to Tablature, and episode 3, Essential Terms. I think the appearance of the tablature is quite nice. I have MuseScore, and I've been working hard at getting feedback from people on what's easiest and clearest to see. One of the other things that I went ahead and did, which I thought would be very helpful for students, is that whenever I mention a source in the text, it will be underlined, and you can click that source, and it will take you directly to it. So, for example, if I mention the Folger Dowland Lute manuscript, you can click the button and it will take you right to a facsimile of that. And you can go investigate the music yourself, which I thought was really cool. So that's one of the advantages to having a digital copy. I also include high quality color photos. And this is something, for example, this is me changing some frets, so showing some of the fret knots and things like that, and the ability to incorporate color. You see, this is an example of bad knots that I drew there. This is really wonderful because when you print a book, obviously, when you make a physical copy of a book, one of the difficult things can be that the cost goes up significantly when you include color images. And which is such a shame. I mean, it's totally understandable, but it's really, really nice to have beautiful color images of the lute and other things. I want to show you one picture. Like here, for example, this is part of the string tying chapter, and you get a beautiful picture of my bridge, and you can see right there, oh, Laudon is using he's using some Nile gut octaves, oh, and he's using the Aquila Reds right there, and oh, is that a gut chanterelle? So you'll find out very quickly that I don't change a string till it breaks. But I think this is a wonderful thing about having a digital book. So like I said, one of my big goals here was to make this as accessible to as many people as possible and as useful as possible. I designed the book with the idea that you may be a student who does not have access to a teacher or even other advanced players to learn from. And so obviously a lute book can't cover everything. There's no way to learn everything you need to from a single source. But I tried as hard as I could to make this book into a hub of information where you could open the book, and if you have a question and the answer isn't in the book, there's a link in the book that could lead you to that answer. So, for example, if you're trying to learn more about rhetoric, and how that applies to Renaissance lute playing. You could go to my chapter on rhetoric, and there are some sources and links both to primary sources from the 16th century, things like Peacham and Wilson, or a modern source like Robert Toft. Now, obviously, if it's a modern source like Robert Toft in one of his books, you'll follow the link and it will take you to where you can purchase his book. So whenever it is something that is copyrighted, I will lead you to the place you can go to get that information in the easiest way possible. Now, the book is divided into multiple sections. I've got a preface, a whole section on the instrument with chapters like choosing a lute, the care and maintenance of your lute, humidification, changing strings, types of strings, changing frets, travel, tuning. Then a section on musical foundations. This entire sort of section with multiple chapters is things you can work on as a musician separate of the lute to make you a better player, to make you a better musician that can communicate with other players. And things like obviously lute notation, counting and rhythm, solfege. And I cover a couple different systems of solfege, fixed do, as well as some historical solfege systems. Your musical ear, how to work on ear training, music theory, rhetoric and interpretation, as I mentioned, reading primary sources, which I think is really important, which obviously has tons of links to primary sources, finding community. Then I have a section on technique, which obviously is very important. These have lots of videos, and this is sort of my way to help the student who doesn't have a teacher. Because I think if you don't have a teacher, the next best thing is maybe watching a video and then having a book. So you have it in writing and then you have a video, and you can use those two things to work out as much as you can. And then you grab lessons whenever you possibly can from whoever is an advanced player. So I've got topics like sitting position, basic right hand technique, basic left hand technique, accent based fingerings, shifts, extensions, bars, gropey, speed and tempos, economy of motion and preparation, graces, rolls and strums, legato, tone, rubato, injury prevention and treatment. And I really try to dive into as many ways of doing things as possible. So, for example, in the section on right hand technique, I'll talk about thumb under, obviously, which was the most popular right hand technique of the 16th century. But there'll also be some passages and information on plectrum playing, on historical thumb out playing, on whether nails were ever used, lots of different things. And so I think the idea here was that I wanted to provide everyone with as much information as they could to kind of get them off on the right foot. Now, because I made this book with the assumption that students would not have a teacher or they don't have access to consistent lessons, I also included a large section on practice. So things like general principles of practice, warming up, sight reading tablature, how to deal with exercises, learning the pieces. Now, under learning the pieces, I decided we all learn in different ways at different stages. And so I've included sort of 3 different methods for going about learning your pieces. One that's sort of geared toward beginners who know absolutely nothing. They just want to start on their pieces. Another that's sort of geared toward an intermediate or experienced player who has some background and can sort of ingest more at the same time. And then one for really advanced players, which are people who are very fluent and are just looking to sort of maybe organize their practice in a slightly better way, or look for inspiration for some of their more advanced students if they're a teacher. And obviously, I think this book can be used with an instructor, and I do think that lessons are the gold standard for learning the lute, but that there are people that just don't have regular access. So I wanted to fill that gap. How to maintain pieces, how to deal with nerves, and then after that, it's just the repertoire. So this book, for the most part, relies on actual music for advancing in your studies. I have in the very first level of repertoire, I do have a number of exercises in the opening pieces to kind of help sort of make the ramp a little gentler between pieces. I also, at the beginning of each repertoire level, there are 5 different levels. I include a treble or two, which are single line pieces. And I've encouraged students in the book that you can start with just learning all of the trebles and then work on adding a second voice. But there's a lot there to help students. And finally, and the repertoire range is pretty significant. I tried to go from as simple as I could find to really some of the most advanced repertoire from the 16th century. So there's a big range there. So if you're a beginning student, I think you'll find this book useful. If you're a very advanced student or even a pre-professional, I think that you could find a lot in this book to use. The appendix includes things like fingerboard note charts for alto, lute, and G. I didn't include every single tuning of the lute just because it would have ended up being hundreds of pages. So I went with the most common, which is your G lute. Some little handouts for ease of finding that I included in my online series, but that way you can find them quickly in the book. Additional repertoire for 10 course lute. I know some players out there play 10 course, which really takes you into some different territory. And I wanted to make sure that my 10 course players out there got some love. So I've got additional 10 course rep. I've got at the very end in the appendix a full list of the current videos in the Fundamentals of Lute Playing video series, so you can go to the back and very easily find a video. I've also included a large number of links to existing primary sources on pedagogy. So if, for example, you want to go read Thomas Robinson and his thoughts on right hand playing, or Robert Doland and John Doland in the variety of lute lessons, or Capirola, or even if it's something very rudimentary like the introduction to Daltza's book, you can follow that link and go check and decide for yourself what you think of the source. All of the pieces have their sources included so that you can go and check and see, oh, well, did Laudon make a mistake? The whole book is, I think it's like 307 pages in terms of the page count, but that's not counting the pages that are above. I think it's something like 317. So one of the other advantages to making a digital book is that I can make corrections. One of the hardest things when publishing a physical copy of a book is you've gone over it 5, 6, 7 times and you go, okay, I think I've caught everything. And then you hit the go button and the book is published, and then immediately you open the book and you go, oh, I missed something. So my plan with this book is that I'm treating it as a first edition. And in the preface, I actually include a way to contact me if you find an error, or if you think that something pedagogically is missing and you'd love to see it added to the book. And I can think of a couple things that people may call for. So I'm predicting maybe people will say, oh, we could use some more beginning pieces in the book, or oh, it was really great to have those extra 10 course pieces, can we have more of those? Or gee, Laudon, I noticed you misspelled this word here. There's a way to contact me, and what I'm planning on is in a year or year and a half, I'm going to take all of that feedback and make a revised edition. And I think that allows me to send the book out into the community, get feedback from students, and find out what people really need, and then adjust the book to those needs, and then put out a new revised copy where it has those changes made. So I hope that answers a lot of questions, but if you have any questions about this method, please leave a comment in the comment section below. I will have links to where you can purchase it. It's just my Patreon page, but I'll have a direct link both in the comments and in the description. And I will also put one in the comment of the Facebook post that I will make on this. But this has kind of been a baby of mine for the last 6 months that I've been working on. I've been I have 2 children now. My second child was born in the fall, and so I've been away from the instrument more often. But late at night, I've been able to toil away at this, and it was nice to finish this up so I can now move on to playing and performing and recording performance videos again. If you have any questions, please let me know. But as I said, when you purchase the book, you will get 2 copies of the book, so make sure you download both. One is in French tablature and the other is in Italian. I hope you enjoy the book. I hope you find it useful in your journey to learning Renaissance lute, and I look forward to hearing everybody's feedback and their stories of using the book. Have a wonderful day and happy luting.